The weird thing about psychedelics is after you've done psychedelics enough in your lifetime, a strange thing starts to develop for some people. I can only assume this is what happened for me, and I would expect that the same conclusion would be arrived at from other psychedelic explorers. But there comes a day when you kind of have the urge to use the medicine, but there's a reservation there because you so profoundly understand the implications of what you're contemplating doing, right? In other words, I know how much work is involved mentally, emotionally, spiritually in a psychedelic experience that I'm very, very hesitant to ever embark on a trip unless I feel fully prepared or if I'm at a place where I'm willing to give that amount of myself, my time and energy. The psychedelics have a purpose, right? It's another thing that happens to a psychedelic explorer, a psychenaut, is that you cease doing these things for any recreational reason, right? You identify that the medicine is very powerful and it should not be abused, it should not be disrespected, it should be honored and it should be cherished as a sacred medicine. And that's how a lot of the indigenous peoples saw their medicine, and that is the correct way. You know, we can always look to the original peoples to know how to be. It's there. That's why I'm so drawn to them. It's just an incredible culture that it just doesn't stop giving back to the world, no matter how many atrocities befall it. It just keeps coming back with higher levels of education. And it's just, you know, a lot of the native folks have stuck true to their traditions and to their culture for so long, even though it was like a barrage of influence coming at them from all directions, trying to take away their sovereignty, take away their land, take away their identity, take away their everything. And they somehow, most of them, have stayed true to their original culture and their original purpose, you know, that was bestowed upon them by the creator. And it aligns so perfectly with my own views. I guess that's why I'm drawn to them. But that to say that, like, I respect the medicine so much that even the thought is like, oh, I don't know, you know, because there's so much involved. And because it's no longer a recreational activity. To me, it's the equivalent in the modern day age of like going to see a psychologist or a therapist, right? It's a big deal because you have to set aside huge amounts of your time and money, probably because it's usually expensive unless you have it paid for by, you know, your work or insurance or something like that. But for most people, they're going to be paying for this out of pocket. And it's a huge commitment because you're not just going to go to this place and talk with someone once a week. You have to apply that stuff. You have to then integrate all that information that you learned and all those lessons that you worked through with the psychologist, with the therapist. And there needs to be a certain level of integration. And in fact, I would argue that that's the core part of it is the integration, because without the integration, you're not taking anything on board. So it's kind of useless, right, in a way. I mean, good exposure nonetheless, but if you're not going to live and breathe this stuff, and this could be applied for many things in life, right? Unless you're willing to live it and breathe it and really embody these teachings, I would question the effectiveness of any of it. But the same could be said for a good psychedelic experience, is that it is very much like I've said this before, it's like 20 years of therapy sometimes in one session. It's potent stuff, and that's why I'm so hesitant to go on a trip and to ingest the medicine, because I know there's so much involved to do it right, to do it effectively, that it's not something that I take lightly. And I don't think anybody should. That's how one respects the medicine, is respecting the power behind the medicine and the power that the medicine will offer you to change your life. And that's how people are able to overcome drug and alcohol addictions. That's how people are able to move past their PTSD or their past traumas and grow as individuals, because it gives you, when they say it's a trip, it is a trip. You're taking a break from yourself, from your oftentimes unhealthy ways of thinking. It gives you an opportunity to have a moment of clarity, right? And let's be real here, not just a moment. A lot of psychedelics, you're in this space for 4 to 6 hours with mushrooms, maybe, and then up to 12 hours with LSD and other things. So, I mean, and I think peyote, I've never done peyote myself, but I think it's like a multi-day trip. So you really, that's a huge commitment. You have to take time off of work and make sure that your kids are taken care of and that you have support to take you through this thing so you don't have to do it alone. And there's a lot involved, but I mean, it's so good for you, right? And it's so contrary to what you might read online or what the so called self assigned authority figures would have you believe, that it's, all drugs are the same. And first of all, it's not a drug. Okay, let's get out of this way of thinking of all drugs being on par with each other because the legal public system says so. No, that's bullshit. We all know that's the case. A plant that grows wild and happens to have a psychedelic effect is not a drug. It's a plant. And if it's beneficial to humankind, then it's a plant medicine. You know? The reason why it hasn't passed all of the same regulatory tests and rigorous approval process as other ingestibles like pharmaceuticals is that there's no money to be made in it. It grows in the ground all by itself. How does somebody, first of all, you can't patent a plant unless you've modified it in some way. So the magic mushrooms that are growing on cow patties in the fields, there's no money to be made on that. It's growing on shit for free, all by itself. And one could very easily come along and ingest one of these, knowing obviously 100% that that's what it is, and have a marvelous experience for something that grows in the shit, in a cow's shit. Like, how similar is that to the whole lotus thing, right? Growing in the muck. And it's a beautiful flower, right? That's that's such a beautiful way of looking at the psychedelic experience, is that it's you're allowing a new flower to grow within the muck inside of you. And it's proof after that amazing things can come out of shitty situations. You know, you might have this dark, festering wound, disgusting environment within you, but nature is so powerful and so wise that it can take that mess and grow something beautiful out of it. The whole concept of compost, right? That's what that is. Taking things that we regard as trash, as garbage, as just leftovers, unusable material. And nature's like, well, actually, that's what you're made out of. It's such a beautiful thing. I had to make a video today because it's like such a powerful insight. Because for the past, I don't know how long, months, maybe even years at this point, I don't remember the last time I've taken any earth medicines, but I often get the urge because sometimes getting to know the spirit of the depression, the spirit of the anxiety, the spirit of the fear, you see it kind of come and go. And when it's on its highest, at its highest peak, it's like I get the urge to be like, I could counter that with a good, solid psychedelic experience and just be done with it, right? Instead of it keep circling around in my head every day unnecessarily. And it's not to say that it's an easy out, but it's a vehicle towards healing in a way. So why wouldn't you use it? It's like God put those things there for us to use, right? not abuse, but to use as we see fit, as needed. It's almost like Mother Nature has the pharmacy. It's there, right? We know this. It's in our jungles, it's in our forests, it's in our land. It's everywhere. It's in the sun, it's in the air, it's in the water. It's all there. Everything we need is there. But then here come the egotistical humans coming along saying, I know better than nature. So, just so naive. Like to think that we're above nature, of the force that created us. Come on. Come on. Of course, the healing is going to be found in the source creation energy. So obvious. But that's the thing is that even though I get the urge, and first of all, I'll preface what I'm about to say next by saying I don't do mushrooms anymore for the simple fact I have nothing against them. I think they're very powerful medicine. But for me, my digestive system just does not agree with them whatsoever. I'm not sure what it is. I think I've grown sort of an aversion to them, like a almost like a PTSD. But it's something that, like, even now, just thinking about it makes my stomach gurgle in a weird way. Um, but like, I know for me, my time with the mushroom is over for now. I mean, that may not always be the case, but for now, I feel no urge to ingest the mushroom. Again, I have no problem with it. I love the effects of it. It's just physically, it's very hard for me to digest, and I often will end up in the midst of a psychedelic experience feeling like shit, like nauseous and having digestive issues. And that's not fun to deal with when you're in the midst of a heavy psychedelic trip. Which reminds me, I want to talk about macro and micro doses as well. But it's not uncommon to get the urge to engage with LSD. I still believe in the power of LSD because at the physical level, it's absorbed through the mouth, which is a lot easier on your system. You can actually eat a small meal beforehand to give you a little bit of energy for the trip. Um, and it mostly gets absorbed through the mouth, so I don't have the digestive issues. I love how DMT, even though it's insanely powerful, it's short acting so that you can take it on a day where you have other things to do and it's not like you're incapacitated for the rest of the day or your abilities are affected in any way. It's like within an hour or two, you're pretty much back to baseline. So there's that. More recently, for the past month or so, I've put myself on a ketamine protocol, and I'm still on the fence with that one. I don't personally see it as a conventional psychedelic. It's clearly more of a dissociative, which would have its own set of benefits, I would think, in therapeutic applications. But for me, so far, and I've dabbled a little bit with ketamine in the past, I don't know that it agrees 100% with my chemistry, but I'm trying to give it its fair chance and go through the whole protocol very closely. Like, that's another thing is that when you decide to experiment with these earth medicines, do it in a scientific way. Don't just do it willy-nilly. Have a log, a diary that you write all these things down in. Take your blood pressure beforehand. This is assuming that you're not doing this in a clinical setting, which personally I'm not a big fan of because I think it takes away from the experience. But if you're someone like me who's experimenting with these things in the safety of your home and you've taken all the proper precautions to make sure that you're going to be safe and that your environment's clean and you've taken care of your body beforehand and after and during, and you have your water ready and everything's set, right? Like, take it seriously because it's a big deal. You're messing with the neurons and the chemicals of your brain. And I think that a lot of us got into this mindset of just trusting the pharmaceutical industry to know what's good for us. And look at what has happened because of that. Look how many people are addicted to things and their bodies are falling apart because they put too much faith in pharmaceutical medicine. So don't treat it like that. Treat it, I mean, really give the same level of seriousness to all things that you ingest, be it pharmaceutical, earth medicine, whatever, food, water, everything. Everything that you take in, be it at the physical, spiritual, mental level, Know what you're taking into your body. Understand the risks. Understand the benefits and the side effects that come with it, because there's going to be benefits and side effects with everything, right? So, yeah, I think I got out most of what I wanted to say. The only other thing that I wanted to touch on was the microdose versus macrodose. And I think what this comes down to, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, basically when you take a psychedelic, you can take it in a very small dose, which will barely have any effect whatsoever, any noticeable effect, versus you can take a larger dose, which will pretty much potentiate, you'll experience the full potential of that medicine. So, but it's a lot harder on the body, right? It's a lot harder to process mentally and spiritually. Like I remember taking some psychedelics where the dose was too high and I just became a puddle of mess. You don't want that either, where you just have to sit and meditate quietly in a dark space to get yourself through it, which was a huge growing experience for me, and I wouldn't change it in a way. It was not a very pleasant experience, but would I undo it? Would I take it back? No, because it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot of my threshold for those kind of things. Now I know that I can go through insanely difficult mental and physical um, symptoms or emotions or whatever, and I can get myself through it. So it does develop a certain sense of confidence. And from that confidence, you can establish more security in the things that you do. But it's not something I would recommend, right? Better yet, to know your, first of all, whether you're a microdoser or a macrodoser. We got to figure that one out, because for me, microdosing doesn't work. I've tried it many, many times now. That's kind of what's going on with the ketamine. I'm giving it its chance at the lowest active dose, which is what you generally want to do, is you only want to take as much medicine as activates the effect that you're looking for. You don't never take more than that. That's called a threshold dose. And you want to get just above that, basically, where you're enjoying the benefits of the medicine, but at the very, very minimal level. You never want to take more medicine, doesn't matter what it is, than you need. Plain and simple. Because with more medicine comes more side effects, right? So figure out if microdosing makes more sense for you. You have to probably do some experimentation to figure that one out. I did. And I discovered that microdosing doesn't work as well for me. It doesn't work hardly at all. It's actually kind of annoying, because for me, the psychedelic benefits come from that overcoming what you feel like is impossible at the time. And then you're like, holy crap, I was able to overcome that thing. Even though I thought initially that it was impossible for me to do so, here I am on the other side of it. That's what I love about the psychedelic experience. And when I microdose, for me, this is just me again, right? It's like I'm constantly sitting on the threshold of something happening, but nothing's developing, right? I don't personally believe as much in the just take it and see what happens, like let the medicine do all the work. I think a large part of it, probably even more than 50% of it, is you integrating again that the teachings in the experience. That's where you're going to see the most benefits. And that's why for me, a macrodose is necessary, because I need to get to that point of like, it's almost like you have to, how could I explain this? You have to kind of like floor the pedal, the accelerator in the car, in order to get back down to a place of moderation. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's a poor analogy, but you get what I'm saying. You kind of have to go full throttle in order to know, like you have to go past the line at some point in order to know where the line is, right? You've heard that said in many other contexts, I'm sure. Psychedelics is no different. You discover that with cannabis, right? When you start experimenting, especially with edible cannabis products, inevitably, when you start ingesting those, you're going to see, uh-oh, I've taken too many, or I've taken one bite too much, and it's pushed me over the edge. Luckily, with cannabis, there's no real danger, right? It's going to be uncomfortable, but there's no physical danger. You can't die from an overdose. The worst thing that'll happen will be some anxiety, you know, unless you have pre-existing mental conditions, which is something that you have to think about as well, right? If you're schizophrenic, you shouldn't be taking any cannabis or LSD or anything, any psychedelics whatsoever. You should probably just stick to your medication if that's helping you. But, you know, there's been critics on the other side of that too. So really, you have to figure out what works for you. And that's why I say do some experimentation in a safe way. Always, always, always with harm reduction practices in mind. Your number one goal when experimenting is harm reduction. You don't want to harm yourself at all if you can avoid it. And that's done very easily by going low and slow and methodical and scientific in your approach, and write everything down. Take your blood pressure and your heart rate before, during, and after, and compare. Let me give you an example and I'll explain to you why this is so important. So, I mentioned I'm experimenting a little bit with ketamine to see if it will alleviate certain depressive symptoms, especially at this time of the year where the season starts to change. I find that it starts to impact me more and more as the season changes. And I'm just trying to see if some ketamine might help. Now, my first dose, the first time I did it, it's basically twice a week. It's a nasal spray, and you do 5 sprays, which equals something like 60 milligrams or 70, 72, somewhere between 60 and 72 milligrams in 5 sprays between the two nostrils. Um, so the first time, okay, I got a sense for what it was like. And again, right, just like the beginning of this video, I was a bit nervous when I started experimenting. That's normal. Once you get a sense of, oh, okay, now I understand how the medicine works, I understand how it affects my body, I can better be prepared next time mentally, physically for this experience, right? Things like making sure that you don't eat too much, because the last thing you want to do, especially on an oral ingestible psychedelic, you don't want to eat beforehand because you could have, like I was saying with the mushrooms, nausea, all kinds of problems. Now, for me, that happens with the mushroom anyway, even if I don't eat anything. But it's that digestive process that you want to avoid because your body's already going to be going through a marathon, right? The psychedelic experience, while for the most part is very safe, it's also taxing on the body physically and mentally and spiritually, of course, as well. So you want to make sure you want to prepare your body and your mind just like you would for an actual marathon. Like it's going to be a push, and I want to make sure that I'm prepared with that, with being properly hydrated and eating healthy food beforehand, the day before especially, right? You're kind of like preloading, they call it, preloading with micro and macronutrients and hydration. So anyway, as I'm experimenting with this, the second day, it's twice a week for the first month. Then it's once a week for the second month. And then the third month is like once every 2 weeks. So it slowly goes down and down and down because technically I think how it works is that your bloodstream should be saturated with it at that point, and most of the effects will have already started to manifest. Now, first time, no problem. Didn't really experience any noticeable effects, and that's been kind of my impression so far after 4 sessions I think I've done so far. And I'm not really seeing a lot happening, but I think part of the reason, just as an aside here, is that I'm not going inside enough. You know, I'm taking the medicine and then I'm watching TV. Maybe I need to take the medicine and lay down and put the blindfolds on and just meditate for an hour or two, right? I'm sure a lot of people watching are like, yeah, hello. But, you know, again, I thought maybe, and it's the pharmaceutical illusion, right? That just let the medicine do its work. You don't have to do anything. You're just like a passive observer while the medicine does all the work. No. And that's probably why it's not working as well for me as it could. I'm sure a lot of proponents of ketamine are shaking their heads out there. But then again, the first time I experimented with ketamine, it was in its actual natural, you know, chemical form, right? It was a street drug. It was not this pharmaceutical spray that is only half, as I understand it, half of the ketamine medicine is It's esketamine, right? That's only part of what you would get in the street drug. And again, forgive me for using that term, but I have anyway. So not to say that it's not been as effective as I'd like, but I'm trying to give it as much of a fair chance as possible because I know it has helped for a lot of people in similar situations. So I'm doing it carefully. I'm writing it all down on a log. I'm taking my blood pressure before and after. Well, actually, it says in the protocol I was reading, I'm following an actual therapeutical protocol, and it says that you should take your blood pressure before, and you should take it 40 minutes into the experience after you've sprayed. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm following that protocol as closely as possible because that's how it's done in a clinical setting, and I can only imagine it's done that way for safety and harm reduction purposes, right? And you take a couple sprays, you wait to see, always waiting to see if there's going to be any negative reactions, and if so, stopping right away. So it's low and slow, it's steady. I know a lot of people go, you shouldn't really do that. It should be one in each nostril. You wait and see what happens. So again, first session, nothing really to report. It's like well tolerated. I think I put in my log. It was well tolerated, slight dissociative effect, slight loss of motor coordination. That's about it. Like nothing major to report. It was like having a couple glasses of wine. That's it. The second experience, right, started off similar. All my vitals were the same at the beginning. Actually, no, that's not true. My blood pressure, because I think I had just smoked a cigarette or something, and I'd smoked some tobacco, and that caused my heart rate to go up, which is normal. But it was still in the process of coming down. I think my body was still processing the tobacco, so my heart rate was a little elevated. I was also taking, here's where you have to be careful, learn from me, do as I say, not as I do. I was obviously taking too many supplements at the same time, and unbeknownst to me, was having a heart rate decline, a significant decline in the combination of supplements that I was taking. So I'm not going to go into detail about what those were exactly, but suffice it to say that just because you're buying something over the counter, because it comes in a supplement form, does not mean, don't be confused by the term natural when it comes to supplements. There's still a risk. There's still a risk of side effects crossing over and them kind of like playing on each other, right? Forgive me, I can't find the right words, but you know what I'm saying. Like, for example, I think two or three of the supplements that I was taking, and I didn't know this at the time, didn't do enough research, right? Bad, bad, bad. Two or three of them were having a lowering of my blood pressure effect that were stacking on top of each other. So they were all lending themselves to an even lower blood pressure than I should have by taking each one individually. So, and I didn't even know this. I have low blood pressure to begin with, so I shouldn't be taking anything that lowers my blood pressure to begin with, let alone two or three of them. So that had this effect. So what ended up happening was after I processed the tobacco, I think what happened is my heart rate just kept going down and down and down and down and down. And to compensate, my blood pressure came up a little bit to increase more circulation because my heart wasn't beating as fast. My typical blood pressure is something like 60, right? 60 to 65 is usually my normal range, which is quite low. So I think it's in the normal range, but it's still on the lower side of normal. And every time I take my blood pressure, the needle is always like all the way at the bottom, right, for blood pressure. So like the normal range, but at the very bottom of the normal range. So taking my blood pressure, right, as a precaution for the ketamine therapy, caused me to notice, oh crap, my heart rate was 44 when I took my blood pressure the second time. Took it the first time, it was high, so I'm thinking, okay, it was like in the 70s or 80s. I'm like, that's high for me, but still within the normal range. I'll note it down on my log. But then 40 minutes into my ketamine session, I took my blood pressure again, and I'm like, holy crap, my heart's at 44. This is too low. I even wrote that on the log. Not good. Too many supplements, probably. And sure enough, that's what had happened. Now, I don't think the ketamine had anything to do with it, unless it had some kind of weird adverse reaction with the supplements, which is entirely possible. I don't suspect, just because I understand loosely the mechanism of action for the ketamine, and if anything, ketamine will generally raise your blood pressure and heart rate. So I don't think that it was part of the three other things that were lowering my blood pressure, but those three other things together definitely were having an effect. And because I took my blood pressure, I saw it. Like I try not to take my blood pressure unnecessarily, like compulsively, because you don't want to get into that like fear state. But in this case, because I was going through a chemical or a ketamine trial, I was taking my blood pressure, and I just so happened to notice this phenomenon, and I'm lucky that I did, because it could have been, quite honestly, could have been fatal. So I'm happy and lucky that I noticed that and discovered it when I did. But it just goes to show, it lends itself to the point of, make sure you know what you're taking and what effect it might have and how it might affect with other things that you're taking. And my conclusion that I arrived at was I shouldn't be taking too many things to begin with anyway. Like sometimes I'm taking like 5, 6 different supplements in one day, and that's just too much. I gotta start narrowing the focus on the things that I really need. Take 1 or 2 supplements for those key things that I need help with, and just forget about the rest. Because quite honestly, the rest is all like preventative stuff anyway. That's like just in case, like an insurance policy, right? Like multivitamins and vitamin C and D and all these other things. There's lots of stuff I could do to make sure that I get plenty of those vitamins without having to take supplements, right? And those are probably not the things that were lowering my blood pressure. There were some other things in there, again, I won't get into it, but let's just say, exercise supplements, which are notoriously bad for you. That kind of stuff you got to be very careful with, because that might have an effect with some heart medication that you're taking, or I don't know, a prostate supplement that you're taking that was over the counter. You think, oh, it's just some benign thing, but oh no, it's having an effect not just on your heart medication, but also this other supplement that you're taking. Oh crap, there's those three things, right? And that's where I ran into some trouble. But it was a good soft lesson for me, because I don't do that anymore. I'm trying really careful not to take too many things. So now it's like 1 or 2 supplements max per day, and I don't go beyond that. And I really make sure to research and read every single thing about that medication before I take it. And just to drive the point home towards psychedelics, because that's the main topic of this video, the same exact rigorous process needs to be taken with psychedelics. Basically, you want to treat everything the same, whether it's a pharmaceutical, a psychedelic, an over-the-counter supplement, whatever, you know, table salt, I don't know, anything. Whatever you put in your body, do the research to know how safe it is. And if there are risks, understand the risks and understand how to mitigate those risks. And understand that if you happen to be on the wrong side of that risk and you find yourself experiencing bad, nasty side effects of some kind, how to deal with those immediately without letting them fester, or without getting into more trouble by just not knowing what to do or not doing anything about it. So hopefully that makes sense. But again, I'll finish this video by saying that I am a huge proponent of all psychedelic research, because I think that they have a huge potential to take human consciousness to the next level, and to let go of some of these broken pillars of so-called pillars of society that are looming over us still, that have no place or purpose in this world anymore, that are just there out of superstition or a bad habit. Authority being one, the false authorities, and the legal public systems. We can start there, right? And Of course, that's why these things are illegal, right? You've heard this argument before. That's why these things are illegal, because they make you question things. They open your mind to go, do we really need things like government? Do we really need these overly strict policies on everything under the sun? No, we don't. And you arrive at those conclusions very quickly when you start experimenting. That's kind of like a bonus, positive side effect, if you will, of the medicine, is that within your first few experiences, your mind immediately will start to open. Maybe it has something to do with the pineal gland. I don't know. And that how, as we age, that the pineal gland starts to calcify. Maybe it's helping that process. Maybe it's just shaking you up inside, creating new neural pathways. Whatever it is, might be a combination of all those things. It awakens something in you. And I would say it awakens your spirit that you may have forgotten was even there, because we get used to, in the modern world, just this constant day-to-day cycle, this repeating pattern of what we call life, which is really artificial in a lot of ways. It will kind of like pull you out of that. It's sort of the red pill from the Matrix. It will, like it or not, it's going to pull you right out of that experience. And the people that talk about having bad trips, that's a whole video that we could talk about all on its own. But the people that talk about having bad trips are the ones that are resisting this process, that are not surrendering to the experience, that are not letting go. They're trying to fight the medicine. That's when you end up having these bad trips. And trust me, I've had what I used to perceive as bad trips. I've had many of them. But now I understand that that's the lesson that I needed at the time. Sometimes hard lessons are uncomfortable. Sometimes, hard lessons come with pain and suffering, but that doesn't mean that they're not necessary. That doesn't mean that you won't be a better person or a better human, a better man, a better woman if you don't go through that process. Of course you will. You're going to be much better off for it after, because you'll finally have worked through these problems that are holding you back. And that's the miracle that is all earth medicines, is they have the ability to break those habits, and very quickly. That's why I say 20 years of therapy in one session sometimes. That's why I'm a fan of macrodoses, because you don't get that as much with the microdose. It's like a longer, more drawn out process, and that's in part why I personally don't like it. But everybody's different. Everybody's body chemistry is different. Everybody's going to react to these things differently. Everybody's going to have their own preference or what works for them, right? So follow your heart. I mean, do what works for you, but make sure that you exhaust all the different possibilities while playing it safe and doing it in a methodical way, a systematic way. Record everything, write everything down, every feeling, every thought. I mean, to a certain degree, you get what I'm saying. If it's relevant to your research, not every single thought that goes through your head, but every thought that's relevant to the research that might be applicable to future trips, or to maybe help somebody else that's like, hey, I'm always curious about trying mushrooms. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience? You can break out your book and say, yeah, on this date I had this happened. And so anyway, oh boy, almost 40 minutes. I guess I had a lot to say, but I hope that was a helpful video for some folks. Was helpful for me to vocalize these things and externalize a lot of this stuff, because again, I have the urge, right? It's almost like the mind, the body is like, hey dude, it's time for our dose, like it's time for another break free, like Neo from the Matrix moment. Like, it's almost like you get too comfortable in your life. You get too comfortable in the conveniences of the modern world. And every once in a while, the mind and the mind especially that knows the power of the psychedelic experience, reminds you and is like, hey dude, don't get too comfortable in this false reality. Don't forget about your spirit and the things that actually matter deep down at the internal level. Don't be fooled by all the smoke and mirrors. Don't forget about your mushrooms. or whatever, your LSD or your ketamine or whatever it is you decide to experiment with, just do it safely, right? Do it with harm reduction practices in mind, always, always. And if you're not sure what that means, research it. Research everything. You have to be kind of like, I don't want to say armchair, but you have to be like a DIY kind of like home scientist, right? Be the real scientist. Don't be led by lobbying agendas and propaganda and political influence or the almighty dollar. Don't be led by those things, but be led by a deep desire to want to heal yourself and to understand the medicine and to understand why people have been using this medicine for literally a lot of them thousands of years. I mean, maybe not things like LSD, but in a form, look into ergot, right? It has been used inadvertently sometimes for a long, long time. And the effects have been noted. And psychedelic, uh, earth medicines, this is not a new concept at all. Just because some people in a suit and tie show up and want to make uh, whatever policy around this plant does not mean that the it's not a useful tool for us as a species, as individuals even. Put that stuff aside for a second and put aside how you feel about those policies and look at the medicine with clear eyes and with honesty and a desire to really understand how these things work, where they came from, and what traditionally they've been used for in history usually by Aboriginal peoples or original peoples. I don't like the term Aboriginal. Original peoples, right? Look at how they've been using that medicine and why. And again, they tend to show us everything that we need to know. It's a beautiful, beautiful culture. Okay, so I've said enough. Hopefully you got something good out of that. Let me know what you think. I appreciate your viewership. Be well, take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.